In the previous video, we looked at how to declare and use functions and closures in Swift. In this video, we're going to take a look at a new data type introduced in Swift called Optionals. We will see how to declare it, what force unwrapping is, and how to use it. Finally, we will see how to use optional binding to find out whether an optional contains a value. The optional is a data type introduced in Swift to handle the absence value in a variable. An optional means the variable can have a value or a non-value at all. Let's see it in action to better understand it. Let's declare a string called text with the initial value of welcome, and we try to convert it to an int data type, passing as argument in the int initializer. In some programming languages, this can throw a runtime error because the string is not a valid number. But here, in Swift, the type returned as the initializer is an optional type. The initializer might fail. It's for this it returns an optional int, not an int. An optional int is written using the question mark after the int type. We can set an optional variable to a state of no value, assigning it the special value nil. Nil can only be used with optional constants and variables. We can define an optional variable without setting a default value initially. It's automatically set to nil. Use the if statement to know whether an optional have a value by comparing the optional against nil. If the value exists, then it's different to nil. Let's change the value of the constant text to a real number. And in this way, the constant number returns optional with a value distinct from nil. And we can check it using the if statement comparing its value with nil. Once we know the value of an optional as not nil, we can get its value by putting an exclamation mark after the optional name. This is known as forced unwrapping in Swift. We must be careful when we use the exclamation mark to try to force unwraps with the value of an optional, as it might throw a runtime error. Another way of testing when an optional has a value is using optional binding. Optional binding can be used with the if and while statements to check for the value inside an optional. We can use it to extract the value into a constant in one single line. For example, let's define a new if statement using optional binding. If let n equal to number, and we are going to copy the print statement used in the previous if statement. Change the name of the constant to print to n. This means that if the optional int returned by the number constant contains a value, we are creating a new constant called n, with the value contained in the optional. Another very useful statement in Swift is the guard. The guard is a statement that the if statement executes a code regarding a condition when met. We can see more about guard here. Sometimes we know an optional will always contain a value. In these cases, we can remove the need to check and unwrap the optional's value as required. These types of optionals are called as implicitly unwrapped optionals. We can write an implicitly unwrapped optional with an exclamation mark after its type rather than a question. For example, let's declare a new string variable using the implicitly unwrapped optionals. Let new string, string, exclamation mark, equal to Swift2. And in this way, we can have access to the value of the constant without the use of exclamation mark because we tell the compiler that it has permission to force unwrapping the constant for us. Excellent! In this video, we have learned what optional type is, how to declare it, and how to use force unwrapping and optional binding to access the value of the optional. Great! In the next video, we will learn about structs in Swift and how to use it.